It's time for the Everyman, where real man talk.
Let's go. Time to grind, get inside your mind. Yeah, we working overtime. That's the only way to climb. We gon' make it in our prime. Signing on the dotted line, cashing checks left and right. That's the way I'm living.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Everyman podcast. Now, that is the second time we have done that because of a false start. And I think I probably have to take the blame for that because I scheduled a live podcast stream and it did not go live. So hands up, I will take it. Tonight, we are joined by a very special guest. We're joined by Mr. Shaun Greenaway. He is a male fertility expert. He has lived experience himself within the challenges of male fertility, and he works with individuals and companies all across the UK to support men with that really difficult challenge that we don't talk about. So, Shaun, how are you doing tonight? And thank you very much for joining us on the Everyman podcast.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm great, thank you, and thanks for your very kind introduction.
Yeah, no, we are super grateful for having you on. It's a topic that we've probably brushed upon on previous episodes for us to start talking about the things that are really affecting men out there. So we've talked about the bigger topics like male suicide, men's mental health, physical health, those types of things. But fertility is almost one of those where we all think that it would never be a problem. But actually, it surprised me doing my research for this podcast, how many men actually struggle with their fertility and some of the sort of the pressures around that, that again, just aren't spoken about. Yeah,
absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. There's almost like an umbrella of men's health and in whatever aspect that is, and then there's so many strands underneath that, and fertility is definitely one of those. And all the statistics, unfortunately, point towards that being on the rise. And I certainly, from as you've hit, you've touched upon, from first-hand experience of being through that, and I know that it's not an easy ride at all. It does affect almost every aspect of your life, both physically and mentally. And it doesn't make good reading, really. Like you said, you've looked at some of the statistics just prior to this, but I'm sure we'll go into it a bit more. But it's more common than people know. Currently, the World Health Organization says that 1 in 6 people, and that's across the genders, will experience fertility trouble or struggles, I should say, and 50% of that will be men. And that 1 in 6 is worldwide. It's completely indiscriminate, and that's what gender you're from, what background, what ethnicity, what country, anything. The statistics don't lie, unfortunately, and as I said, it's on the rise.
Yeah, no, I think you're mentioning lots of stats there where me, prior to doing some research on this podcast, I just wasn't aware of. It's definitely something that it's almost like one of those things that everyone's scared to talk about. And again, like I mentioned, I'm super grateful for you coming on and sharing your story and sharing your expertise for not just us as Everymen on the podcast, but for our listeners too. Before we get into it though, Shaun, we have a bit of a thing we do on every single episode before we really get into the topic, is just to check in. This is a men's health podcast. Make sure everyone's okay, see how everyone's week's been. So firstly, Ethan, I'm going to start with you, obviously, because I always stitch you up with going first on pretty much everything I ask. How are you? How's your week been, mate?
Yeah, mate, been spot on. Really looking forward to today. I know there's been a bit of a break for us. We've been recouping and coming back stronger. Shaun's kicking us off, and it's something that a lot of people are curious to sort of get into. I know you've mentioned a few of the lads have got questions, so I don't want to take too much time. But my week's been solid, mate. It was my granddad's memory on Sunday during the Great North Run, which I won, by the way. I competed in the Great North Run and won it. So that was a tough one to do. And then I had to go to my granddad's memory. So it was been an emotional weekend, something I've not really processed yet, but it was nice to see family, and my mum got a really good sort of set of flowers, and And yeah, it was good. But other than that, not a lot. I'm a bit conscious that Joby's put me on full screen. It's quite off-putting when you can't see what everyone else is doing and things like that. So thanks for that, Joby. Joby's actually dialed in remotely from Turkey because he's getting some unspecified work done in Turkey. I don't want to say what he's getting done, but there's some sort of enlargement happening. So yeah, thanks for dialing in, Joby, and thanks for making me big screen. What about you, Dino? What's going on with you, Dean?
All right, boys. Yeah, not well. Going through a couple of things at the moment, but other than that, I've started doing a 75 hard challenge this week, which means that you have to stick to a diet, exercise twice a day, drink 4.5 liters of water, read a book. And I've also started a 12-week course with Lewis to do a PT with Slater PT for those that know him, just to get fitter for football. So I'm really keen now because I've just I started the year really well, and I've just sort of yo-yoed up and down with me weight, especially after me wedding. So yeah, I'm really keen to kick on with that. Really excited for this podcast. Lewis touched on it earlier. We've had a little conversation before we went live. We've been trying for a baby for a little while now. So I was really keen to get it Shaun on and just sort of pick his brains as to sort of what advice you can give and sort of that sort of stuff. What about you, James?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. It feels like it's been ages since I've been on, to be honest. But yeah, it's good to be back. Love to talk to Shaun about this as well. Me and my missus not trying for a baby as such, but I've been together with her for over 9 years, and we've never had a scare once. So it's a bit of a worry. It's a bit on the back of the mind, you know, like, is it one of us got a problem, or has it just not happened yet? But yeah, it's good to be back on. First live one for me as well, so hopefully there's not too many people watching me.
Yeah.
We want loads watching, man. What you're talking about? There's hundreds of thousands watching.
I know we're breaking the internet right now, boys. Breaking the internet.
Going viral.
Can I just? I know exactly. Can I just say, if Job from Turkey, can he stop making people big? Because James is a Mackham and he's got a massive head and it just swallows my screen. So please don't do that again.
At least we get rid of that pink shirt, though.
That's true. That's true. Vindy, what about you? What's going on with you, pal? No one I've asked you how you're doing. I know you love to talk, so tell me about you.
Thanks, mate. I really appreciate the actual genuine question and then the opportunity to be a little bit of a dick. So, yeah, really appreciate that, mate. Oh, Job, I'm not a fan of this full screen either. He's having our life here, isn't he? I am good. I'm not saying I'm great. Where am I? I think, yeah, there's just loads going on in my life at the minute. So without being too serious, too early, I think, yeah, I'm really glad we've done this podcast tonight, because I think we haven't had a podcast now for 3 weeks, I think. And just this chance to come on and talk to you guys around what life is like at the minute, how I'm feeling, what sort of my stresses are and stuff. It's something I massively look forward to. You guys know I've obviously gone through a breakup fairly recently, and that's been tough. So yeah, the chance to come and talk to my mates properly and spend some bro time and obviously listen and learn from Shaun is something that I'm super grateful for. Shaun, how are you? How's your week been? How's things?
I'm good, thank you. And actually, I just want to say straight off the bat is that I love that you do this. I love that as a group of men, you're discussing actually sometimes, because you know that typically British thing that we do of like, how are you? Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah. And we just do it. But to say, actually, do you know what? This week things have been a bit shit. And like it's awesome. But yeah, I'm generally okay. I've got 2.5-year-old twins, so I'm always underslept. I long for the days where I'll get 7 or 8 hours in ever again, maybe. But other than that, yeah, I think pretty good. I mean, trying to build a business is always pretty tough, and finding the energy to do that after being like a husband and father, like usually this time of night kind of things when I start knuckling down. But yeah, I am good. I think it was pretty much countrywide, but I really enjoyed that weather we had last week.
Yeah,
Kind of, we moved to Cornwall last year, and
oh wow.
yeah, I mean, obviously last year we had the heat wave. We moved down right bang in the middle of that in the July, and so we immediately got that kind of return on investment, so to speak. And then this year it's been like you kind of have to live with these tough Atlantic winters, and we kept saying when the summer gets here, it's going to be great. Come April, May, but it just never got going. And
no,
then,
not at all.
But then, you know, I say that, and I saw my mum the other week, and she was like, "You keep moaning about the summer, but you got a hell of a tan." So
you've got one hell of a tan there, Sean. It's looking good. Like, I have to be honest.
Yeah.
What part of Cornwall did you move to? Because me and Dean have both lived in Cornwall. So.
Oh really? I'm in Cubit, just outside of Newquay.
Yeah, it's lovely down there.
Yeah. I'm just outside of Holywell Bay, which is awesome. I'm as a 40-year-old man, I'm just fulfilling my lifelong dream of learning to surf.
Very cool.
It's so
much harder than you think, isn't it?
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Physically, it just takes it out of you completely.
It's ridiculous. I went out at 7 a.m. this morning, and I just got my ass kicked. And it's one of those ones where you come away from, you're only as good as your last session. I'm finding, and I came away from today just like, I'm going to give it a little rest. But that wears off after an hour. You're like, oh no, I need to go and rectify that, have another go, or you can finish one and just be absolutely buzzing. And yeah, it's great. And it's like my wife said the first time we had a lesson together back in April, and she said, I have not thought about anything other than surfing whilst we've been out here, and doing something like that is like the benefits for your mental health are just like extraordinary.
Yeah, massive. And I think that's a really important thing. And we're probably going slightly to the left of the topic here, but there is. We're also guilty of just being really comfortable with the things that we do as we get older. So there's been plenty of times in my life, like I haven't tried anything new for maybe a year, 2 years or whatever. And you almost get stuck in that rut, don't you? Especially if your mental health isn't amazing in that moment. The ability to go and try something new, really push yourself out your comfort zone, allows you to almost break that poor mentality or that challenging mentality, and maybe sort of see things a little bit more clearer, and especially when you then achieve things. So for example, the first time you stand up on the surfboard, or the first time you did, you were like, wow, I've achieved something here. So even though I might have felt shit this morning, leaving the house at 6 a.m. to get outside in the cold, I've achieved something. So now my day is going to be good no matter what.
Yeah. It's you say like slightly left of the topic, but it's like I said earlier, everything's an umbrella thing. Really, is it all comes back to the same thing of health, and that has many different aspects and layers, really. But yeah, it is. And I was like that. We moved from just outside of London, and we were both commuting into London, and we were just in that rat race, really, of leaving home at kind of, I can't even remember now, I've been out that life for a while, but kind of 6:20 to get the train, running for the train some mornings, like coffee to get me through the day, and then rushing the other end to make the train back, but then almost leaving for the Friday, sinking a load of pints, and then just trying to forget the week over the weekend, and then it's all go again. And like you said, I didn't have any hobbies at that time. I didn't, like, if someone says, "Oh, what do you do in your spare time?" I'd say socializing, which, don't get me wrong, it's great, but that's what it was. And like you said, getting outside your comfort zone and really pushing, and it teaches me so many lessons. It's like discipline, resilience, like you said, getting up at 6 a.m. to go out in the cold, and now actually it's still pretty dark at 6. The sun is coming up about 10:07 at the moment, so it is getting to that point where it's like when I first started learning back in early April, it was like that, and now I've had those kind of nice balmy mornings and the sun coming up at like 4:30, 5, and now suddenly it's coming back around, and you get that reminder, and then going out to do something that might suck and might hurt, but it's all good, really. It is. And like you said, that I will never forget the first time I stood up. It was we had the lessons, and neither of us managed to stand up. Then I bought a board, went out on it, and you realise then that the boards they give you in the surf schools are pretty naff. bought a semi decent one, and literally my first wave, when I went on my own one evening, I caught it, and I actually couldn't control my face. I was like, just like a Cheshire cat. I was on my own, but there was a load of 20-something students, and I just didn't care. Like I was so present. I was beaming, and I was just like, yes. It was, I hadn't had a feeling like that for flipping years, and I didn't do it again. I don't think for most of that session, but I remember getting home, and I was buzzing for about 90 minutes afterwards, and I had to run to a little village shop because it shuts at 7. Which is something I'm having to adjust to as well, and legged it there to get a few beers because it was an incredible day.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's so important to celebrate those moments as well. I think the going for a few beers is so important too. Ethan, I think you were about to jump in. I've seen the hand move.
Yeah, so if anyone noticed on live, I've got something to say. You'll see a finger like this, go like this to say, "Can I make a comment?" But no, so for me, you know, Shaun, you made a great point there. The fact that you and your wife, you've started surfing, things like that. I know it's still slightly left wing here, but you know, I try to do paddleboard in the summer. I wanted to find hobbies which I could do myself, but also with friends that didn't revolve around drinking. I know on previous episodes we've spoken about sort of drink and substance abuse, and I think obviously trying to find those new hobbies is really important for mental and physical health, especially stuff like surfing, paddleboard, and things like that. Some obstacles I had, and I want your 4 opinions on this. Some obstacles I had was people were reluctant to do those things and come out of those comfort zones. And it actually started to turn me off doing it. You know, I've got some great friends who would come with us and try and rent a paddleboard and things like that. But then some people would almost like ridicule you and laugh you and put you down for it and say, "Why do you want to do that?" It's like, you know, and I would be honest, and I know it sounds corny, but I would be honest and say, look, it's something for us to do as friends. You know, it's something for us to do where it's not going out getting pissed, spending £200. You know, you're ill for days after. And I want to know if any of you have had that issue. It's just a thought there with Shaun mentioning it. So sorry, it's something that's not on topic, but have you ever had pushback like that or barriers like that? You know, has anyone got any advice on that?
Yeah, mate, I say fuck them. If you want to do it, just do it, lad.
Get in, James.
That's a good one. I appreciate that, James. Thank you, pal.
I find the hard ones when you're trying to bring these solutions up and everyone else just goes back to, I know, but let's just go to the pub and watch the football or something instead. So it's just our culture. We like I say, we touch on this all the time, but our whole culture is just designed around alcohol. So it's almost like you're not just fighting the person, you're fighting the pub as well. Because that's sort of calling to them. They're thinking they could spend time there, enjoy the football or what have you, rather than spend time paddleboarding. But hey, I'm sure me and Lou will come paddleboarding with you, mate. I think it'd be class.
Yeah.
I'll definitely 100% go. We've already gone to see.
I love paddleboarding.
I've never been.
Paddleboarding. Did it on holiday in April. Loved it.
Was it? Yeah, well,
amazing.
No, sound, I appreciate the offer, boys, but I'm all right, thank you. Like, Shaun, what about you? Shaun, what about you? What's your thoughts, mate? Have you had any sort of barriers in those instances?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you boys have said, like when I meet up with my schoolmates, for example, there was a time where we were scattered everywhere, and we'd kind of meet up every quarter, and the stock kind of answer and plan was just to hit the pub all day and be like you said, like spend 200 quid and then live with like the anxiety for then 2 or 3 days because we ain't getting any younger, and it doesn't like it takes longer and longer to get over it. And so then a few of the lads will start saying, well, why don't we do something like foot golf or like football golf or like flight club or something like that, so it's like an activity rather than just getting levered all day. And then everyone will be like, nah, it's too much effort, let's just go to the pub. And but luckily we have all kind of moved now towards the more like activity based get-togethers, and we like doing it with our families and stuff now, because I was the last to the party, but we've all got kids now, and it's nice to include everyone. And I don't want, I have to work, and I don't want to have to not see my kids again and not be then present for the next day through that hangover and stuff. So I like to include them. I like to be there and then wake up at 6 in the morning with them and just be completely present. But the ridiculous thing is, like, you know, like there's part of my story which we'll come on to, like, about booze. And when I kicked it, I was seen to be the social leper, which is crazy. Yeah. But then you think about, for example, you saying paddleboarding with mates, that is literally hitting all 4 of the happiness chemicals. You've got the endorphins from doing exercise, serotonin from doing it outside, dopamine from then having done something and achieved something, and oxytocin from being with the people you love, your mates. And you know, like, think of that, all those things compared to then on the other side, getting levered and waking up next morning thinking, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Yeah, I have to be honest, you've just described probably where we are as a group of mates. So I'm a slight difference here because I'm now recently single. So that means you inevitably end up just going out for a little period of time. I feel like I've done that now. I've been out enough over the past however many weeks to feel like I've had enough.
Twice.
I think it's about 4 or 5, but it's enough. Like genuinely, it is enough. Where me and Dean, for example, we train on a morning, or we'll go in the sea at, like, after training or whatever. Me and Ethan as well. I've done it numerous times, and that gives me such a better buzz than going out, spending loads of money, getting drunk for nothing. So it's really interesting that your story actually includes alcohol to a degree. Because I would describe us as a group of friends probably on that path of maybe not complete sobriety, but reducing our need for socializing, being revolved around alcohol, and focusing more on quality time over just going out and getting pissed and struggling the next day, as you say, and losing 2 days of your life.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, you know, me and my mates, we've always enjoyed a beer. We've had, like, great nights out, and it's not that everyone results in that. But what we've learned now is moderation's key. Yeah. Usually, when we say all day and now, it's just the day rather than starting at midday and going through to 3 or 4 in the morning.
5 in the morning.
It's ridiculous. So we prefer now to kind of get home and then be able to sleep it off a bit. You just, you know, you go through seasons in life, and we're all that little bit older. Like I said, it gets harder to get over, and you know, we've done that thing, and we do enjoy that, having a beer and having that release as well, because sometimes you need that. It's just about learning to moderate it and learning if it's actually the points where it's not becoming helpful for you, and if you're doing it to bury stuff or escape, or, you know, in my case, I was drastically trying to do anything I could to try and have babies, and so alcohol was the first thing out the door, because it's really not conducive with good fertility.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I'm going to bring up one of our listeners' comments. Just called Darren. I've known Darren. I think we all know Darren, other than James. I've known him for like 5 years. He's a bodybuilder, so he's in his, as you say, he's 43. He's went through some fertility help over the last 3.5 years with his ex at the time, only to keep hitting a brick wall with treatment, all self-inflicted from bodybuilding days through PD use. Now, Darren is one of the most genuine, lovely, kind-hearted, would be an amazing dad. And I know at his age, plus the PD use, and probably just the way that he's mistreated them over the years by constant use, that fertility is probably not a thing for him now, or the likelihood is that it isn't from the conversations that we've had. Do you have any sort of understanding, insight in terms of what steroids, alcohol, like substance abuse, can do to fertility?
Yeah, so in that respect, I need to caveat, first of all, I'm definitely not an expert, but I do know that right, well, firstly, alcohol is really detrimental to sperm health, but steroids, from what I gathered with that, it kind of gives you a huge artificial level of testosterone as one of the factors, and that can impact on your sperm health. So your sperm needs testosterone to thrive. Obviously, it's the male hormone, the main male hormone. They say it's like the tide that lifts all boats. But when you start artificially taking that, your own body then almost stops producing it, and it's doesn't really give it that natural, the free testosterone, essentially what you need, because that's like a natural occurring thing. As I said, I'm not an expert, it's just from kind of what I picked up over the years. But
yeah,
the moment you start, I mean, I'm now on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, as a result of some of the surgeries I had to try and rectify the fact I had no sperm. And any that little that I did have naturally is, my body's just going, oh, okay, you're getting that from elsewhere. So if that's happening with Darren, or has happened in the past, then it's probably most likely that just caused the knock-on effect with his body's natural ability to produce sperm. But as I said, I've got to heavily caveat that with the fact that I'm not an andrologist or urologist. So definitely seek a professional's opinion with that. Yeah,
and I think it's good to sort of caveat that. But I think for Darren, and I'm not going to speak for Darren too much here. It's his life, right? I think the challenge is, because it's not spoken about enough in terms of the impact of alcohol, even alcohol abuse. Alcohol's socially accepted everywhere. It's, as we just discussed, it's all of our social lives. We all go out, or through our late teens, early 20s, we're out, most of us, 2, 3, 4 times a week. And it's almost when you become that later part of life where you start settling down, you have a partner, trying to have a baby. For me, the reason I was so passionate about getting you on is to make young men, especially, really aware of the challenges of some of the decisions they make and the impact that will actually have later on in life. And James, we'll touch on you here. I'm going to give you the mic. You're probably sat in that position currently, right?
Yeah, so I'm only 24, but I've been with my missus for over 9 years now. And yeah, like, you hear about people all the time having scares and stuff. Like, she was on the pill like the whole time. But like, since we got married and after the honeymoon, she came off that. So we've not been using any contraception or something like for almost a year now. Not been trying for a baby, but like, it was one of them things. If it happened, it happened. But yeah, again, not even a scare. So it's like, it's on the back of your mind. Like, is it one of us, or has it just not happened yet? Because it can take a long time for people. So I don't know if you have any experience with like tests you can buy online. But I did a couple of them, and they came back saying they were abnormal. So that got me a bit worried. So I spoke to my GP, and they like referred me to a fertility clinic. So I'll go there, give a sample, and then see what comes back. So nothing confirmed at the moment. But yeah, it's the first time I really talk about it as well, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's a bit worrying, to be honest. Yeah, it's a bit worrying, but it's one of those things, and I'm glad I'm on here, so I get to speak to you as well. Wicked, mate.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, sorry to hear that that's come up. What I would say is take those home tests with a hint of precaution, because then they're nowhere near as they're a good guide. For me, for example, if I'd done it and there just would have been nothing there, so
yeah,
straight off the bat, I'd be like, right, okay, I need to seek advice here. But nothing can replicate a clinical test with embryologists on site, then immediately doing kind of lab grade tests, and they do things like spinning the sperm to in their machines. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but they will take certain samples from your sample that you give. They won't just like go, oh right, let's take one little bit and let's go and look at that. They'll look for the best bits and best options and give you a really thorough result. And you'll be graded on things like, so firstly, the volume. So essentially how much you jizz. And then essentially like the main headline figure will be how many sperm are there. So the average per ejaculation, I think it's about 35 million. And I mean, for me, there was none. And so,
as in zero. There was actually zero. Wow.
Actually zero, yeah. So like, I know people who so a pal of mine that I've met through like talking and stuff, he had 1,500, and that is like extremely low when you're talking 35 million per ejaculate. But he managed to get his around through diet and lifestyle, because the way we live, like especially in the UK, like we've touched upon, is not good for sperm health. And he still needed the assistance of science, and I still had to have IVF, but he got his back up to a good level that he could then produce a sample. And trust me, that's a lot easier than some of the things I went through, which I'll come on to. But so there's your volume, and then how many sperm there are. But then they'll be looking at things like morphology and motility. So your motility is, so to do what they need to do and be swimmers, they need to be motile. They've got a long way to go, and it's kind of the survival of the fittest. One will get there out of, for example, say that 35 million. They need to be swimming in straight lines. Whereas if you've got some that are just kind of look like they're buzzing about, don't really know what they're doing, then that's what will be poor motility. And morphology is how they look. So we can kind of all picture, if someone said, what does a sperm look like? We all kind of know that. They're kind of oval shaped head, long tail, a bit like a tadpole. Morphology would be like irregular shaped heads. There's also a little bit like the top section, but underneath the head bit is, because that's where it breaks off from. That needs to be looking a certain way. And then the tail, some will have split tail, some will have like very short ones. So volume, sorry, not volume, like your number, overall number, motility and morphology are all things that can be worked on. Again, be guided by your urologist with that. But so what I would say is go and get that test done in the clinic. It won't be the most enjoyable thing you'll ever do. But it's the reason you're going for is obviously more important, and your age. I'm so glad, because this is something that I'm really passionate about, actually, is getting that conversation into younger guys. Because I was like 30. I'm trying to think when we got married. I was 30 when we got married, so about 4 years later. So I was 34 before we even started trying. And it's, we go through sex ed at school, and it's how not to get pregnant. And you're taught that if you even get naked near a girl, there's a chance you're going to knock her up, which is just absolute bullshit. It's really hard. And the kind of year that you've been trying with your missus, like if you hadn't done that home test kit and you've gone to the doctor, say after 6 months, they probably would have told you to come back in at least a year, if not 18 months. So you're doing all the right things, and you're young. You're obviously switched on in the fact that you're way ahead of where I was with this. The fact that you're doing home tests, and the fact that you're talking about it, because again, that's like flipping. I was a long way away doing that, even in the early days. So these are all positive signs, and hopefully, you go to the clinic, you get that test, and it'll give you a lot better idea of what the situation is. And they'll probably refer your missus as well, which they did for me. And you both just get a better outlook of where you are.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that. I like how you say like your mate who had was it 1,500? That was his count that he had, and I guess it does only take one, doesn't it, to hit the egg? So there is always hope. But,
absolutely.
It must have been quite brutal for you to find out that you had like none. How was that when you found out?
I'll never forget the day. So my wife and I, at that point, we've been married 4 years, and we've been together 8. And like, even though we've been married 4 years and we hadn't been trying up to that point, it was already annoying us. Like, as soon as we got married, it's that societal thing of like, we had a house, we got married. Everyone's like, so when are you having kids? That question annoyed us anyway, because we just wanted to be husband and wife for a bit. We were doing a lot of traveling and just really being a couple. But then we did make that decision to start trying. In 2017 it was, and she came off the pill, and that can often take about 3 months to work its way out of the system anyway. So we were like, right, mid-year, everything should be go, right, let's do it, let's have a family. And we were to find out that it's not quite as simple as that, and got towards the end of that year, and we were like, okay, this is not like we were, and you say, you know, you're kind of not particularly trying, but you've come off contraception. We were trying. My wife was doing ovulation tests. We had these apps tracking her periods and stuff, and they would show when her most fertile point was. And I'd get the phone call to say, where are you? I'm like, well, I'm at work. You know what I'm doing. And she'd be like,
can you come home?
Like now. And I was like, not really. And I was with a colleague at the time. We were out. I remember where we were in Walthamstow, and I put the phone down, and he had 3 kids at the time, and he was like, "You're trying, aren't you?" Because he'd had it 3 times over. He knew that phone call from, I can't really get home right now, and it's like, right, as quick as you can. So you just, you know, you assume it's going to happen, and you know, why shouldn't we assume it's going to happen? To be fair, but. So the months went on, went to doctors, and the thing is, right, now that I say it, you might be like, well, it should have all clicked a bit earlier, but it doesn't. So it started.
You always have hope, don't you?
Yeah, but I'd had mumps when I was 22, 2005, and I woke up one morning and I had like big bullfrog neck, and I'd actually been with a girl the night before, and I woke up and thought, oh shit, I got glandular fever, and then as the days went on, I got more and more ill, and then that swelling went from there to my chest, and eventually down to my balls, and I was like bedridden for like 2 to 3 weeks, so feverish, hot, cold. But my balls were like, I'm not a small guy. I'm like 6'2", and my fists are quite big. It's hard to give it justice here, but they were bigger than my fist. They were taut. Like there was literally no skin left to spare. And I was like, at the time, I thought it was fucking hilarious. Like this was
got elephant balls.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so one of my mates, once I was diagnosed as having mumps, one of my good mates was a postie. So every day he had it, so he knew he couldn't catch it again, and he would phone me up, say, "Do you want anything?" I'd be like, "Oh, whatever." Like, he'd bring me sweets and stuff. Then one day he comes around, he was like, "Anything you need today?" I was like, "Yeah, you need to get a picture of these." I just dropped my pants, and he was like, "Fucking hell!" And this was early days. It was not smartphones. I had an old Nokia with a tiny little square screen, and it cost 50p to send a picture message, and that picture message went viral, like amongst our like town, because you know, with 50p a message, you have to. I mean, when you're all on pay as you go, you have to really weigh up what's funny. But that one went far and wide. And
quality.
That's the thing. He was like, "Fuck!" Like, but he was like, "Yeah, of course I will. Jesus, this needs to be documented." And so, you know, that happened, and genuinely, my biggest concern at the time was that we were meant to be going Magaluf in a month, and I didn't know if I was going to be well enough to make it. And so, in the end, I got better. Balls went down, and we went to Magaluf, and that was it. I put that behind me. But it was before the days of smartphones, having all this knowledge in your pocket, and because the medical professionals said nothing about any risks to fertility, I didn't ever give it a second thought. And the thing is, like now in hindsight, you know, I look back, it's not like I went into doctors with a bad knee. Like I had a massive problem in my balls. Like it shouldn't take too much to draw the links between potential issues down the line. But nothing was said, so I carried on. As the years went on, I just started hearing, I'd show the picture, and people would make the odd quip about, you know, that can make you sterile. Like, and I still hate that word now. So that just kind of, again, I brushed it off, and that was that. But then when you actually start trying and nothing's happening, suddenly all those little things, those little nuggets that you've buried, they start coming to the surface. You think, oh shit. So I went to the doctors, told him that, and the fact that we've been trying for some time, and thankfully we weren't told to go away and just relax and come back in a few months or whatever. He took our concerns very seriously and referred us both for the test. And so I went up to the clinic, and it was not the most enjoyable experience. Kind of, you know, there's a certain bit of male bravado behind it, and you're like, oh, I'll get one for free. You know, Mrs. knows I'm doing it. Don't have to hide it. And so I went up, and you walk into this room, and that they're all a bit different now, because I've done it in many different clinics now, many different surgeries and hospitals, and they're all a little bit different. But this first one, I'll never forget. There was like a chaise lounge with this, you know, when you go to doctors and they got that big roll of tissue they pull over the seat. and then they change it. It's one of those, and you look at that and you think, oh, how many arses have been on that? And you think, oh, mine's not going anywhere near it. And then there was like a telly with a DVD player and with a little selection, which I didn't even look at, and the remote control was in a freezer bag. I'm guessing because it's easier to replace that than it is clean the buttons out and that. And there was a few crusty mags, and I was like, not touching them. And I know. So you've got all this going on, and the lady's like, right, when you're finished, she's like, put it on the form, the time, and crucially note down if you miss the pot, because the first bit is the most important bit in all this. So you're like, oh, fuck's sake, pressure. And and then there's a little, like in this place, there was a little like a hatch in the wall. They're like, yeah, put it in there, then ring the bell when you're done. And so, right, cracking on. And thankfully I had 4G, so I didn't have to use any of their material.
Yeah, the question was it going to be wank bank or porn or what? But
yeah, porn. Like, well, I've been in some places like in basements and you get no signal, so it's a challenging wank, to tell you.
I like how Vines wanted to know exactly what you used. That's a bit odd. Vines is like, what gets you off?
Well, you ruled off DVDs, you ruled off magazines. I was thinking, surely it has to be, because me and Dean have had this conversation. That's why.
Oh, I bet.
I've learned a few things.
One of my best friends says he doesn't fear so much getting caught wanking; it's what he's wanking over.
Yeah.
That's why he's so quiet.
I can't speak. I can't. I do want to know though, Shaun. Do you still have the photo of your balls, and can we see them when live finished?
I genuinely wouldn't. I wouldn't have a problem showing them, because I held my knob in one hand, but it's been lost, and I've asked around, and it's because it's such old phones. It's not on iCloud and all that, and unfortunately no one's got it. So I still won't ever forget what it looked like. But I actually wouldn't have any issue showing it on the screen. But it's a crazy time. But then I got the job done that day, and then and you popped it in the little hatch, and went to leave and realised I hadn't locked the door because I was so like kind of out of my comfort zone and panicking. And then I got a call about maybe 2 or 3 days later. I was at work, and so I kind of knew that the call would be coming, so I've run out and taken it. And to this day, I don't know who it was that called me, but it wasn't a doctor. I don't think it was even a nurse. I think it was like a receptionist, because she's then said to me on the phone, she's like, right, yeah, I've got the results of your sperm test, and it says that you need to come and do another one in 3 months' time. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, yeah, we just need to make sure. I was like, so what's the result then? And she goes, well, it says that you have, and then she stumbled over this word, which I'd never heard before. She clearly never heard or read before. Mm-hmm. And she kind of was trying to say, it says that you've got azoospermia. I was like, what's that? And she was like, I don't know. So I was like, okay, right, book me in for the other test then, and I'll speak to you later. Thanks. And then get off the phone, Google it, and find out it's azoospermia. And that means that I had none, like literally zero. And like, it's like the most out of body experience. I remember I sat on this concrete block outside of work, and I was like, just go into this like tunnel really of like thinking, what the fuck? Like, you know, you hear, like I said, tens of millions, and I haven't got any, like none. And you think, you kind of go through this moment of like, no, this can't be right. It can't be right. Maybe she said the wrong word, and you start Googling like kind of
similar words,
slight varieties.
Words that sound like it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there are none, and it was that was it. And then you try and go for the whole confirmation bias thing. If they can know that can't be right, go to page 2 of Google, page 3, all saying the same. And you think, oh, that's, you know, it's just madness. And then having to phone my wife and tell her as well, and not being together. And
what was that like? What was that like? The moment of, because I presume obviously you're at an age where you were like, I'm ready for kids. I want to be a dad. You're in that mentality, and how did you actually feel Did you feel like really confused, didn't understand?
Right there and then, it was kind of confusion. Like it's like it was like jumping in a fast flowing river and just being taken, and just kind of thinking, like, just trying to gasp and keep your head above the water and thinking, what's going on? And yeah, I suppose actually in hindsight, I was probably in some form of shock. And then going back into the office and finishing my work day again, I can only put that down to realistically being in shock and just trying to carry on as if nothing's just happened. And then, and because to be fair, I remember that moment crystal clear. I remember them phoning my wife, but I don't remember that evening. I don't remember the days after. So I must have been in, like, deep trauma, because I've recalled this story multiple times. I can never remember those following days. So, but yeah, like the time after that, essentially what then became the whole of 2018 was grief. The whole year was, so that I got that result in January 18. I then took the second test in March, because the sperm cycle takes 90 days to regenerate. So any test worth of salt essentially would be 90 days later. And it was the same, literally zero. And that whole year, get thrust into this new world, this fertility world, and there's all these scientific words you've never heard before, or you're getting sent to multiple doctors, and each one's just like getting you to drop your trousers again and again. They're all copying a feel, and you're thinking, like, what the fuck is going on? You're doing another test, and then you get referred to a specialist at this next place, and then they're taking bloods, and they then want their own sample, because they say, oh, we've got a slightly different clinic here, and then you're having to do it again. And because I remember actually reading on the paperwork, for example, on after doing it the first time, it says, oh, if you want someone to come in and give you a hand, essentially, you can. And my missus offering on the second said, oh, do you want me to come in? I was like, trust me, that'll make it worse. It's like, it's the least sexy environment, and I don't think I wouldn't be able to do it if in that case. Just too much pressure, because ultimately, so that comes back to then your question of how did I feel. And so the overriding thing really was that I was letting my wife down. That like you said, we were ready. We'd been married for 4 years. We'd had the conversation since we'd first been together of wanting children, like you do when anyone starts courting, to use a 18th century word, but you kind of say, because you're essentially aligning your goals, aren't you? And it's that whole thing of like you're matching. And we said that from the outset, really, that we both wanted kids, and then it was just going to be something that we did easily, apparently. And so yeah, then it's like, well, I can't do it. I cannot give my wife what she has wanted her whole life, and of course I did as well. But so I was then going through grief, and obviously grief is often associated with the death of someone, but also it's I was grieving the death of my genetics. I couldn't pass them on. I was grieving this picture of a family that I'd always had, and the route in which I would get there that I always had. And I actually remember saying to my wife that I wanted 5 kids, or at least 4, so that we could have our own 5-a-side football team. And I remember her saying, oh, yeah, exactly. I remember her saying, steady on. But I've come, my family on both my mum and dad's side have huge families. And like I've literally got cousins that I don't even know. And so I just kind of thought that was normal, because that was what I was exposed to as a youngster, big families. And, but I suppose coming from Devon, there's not much else to do, but some
that's very true. There's nothing but like rural areas.
Exactly.
Dark nights.
Yes. So and gone from suddenly thinking I want a 5-a-side football team to thinking I can't have any. And so grief is 5 stages, the first 4 of which in no particular order, because they come and go, but it's denial, blame, depression, and anger. And those were interchangeable. I remember the blame aspect, for example. So it kind of got attributed to the mumps, even though there's, it can never be truly told like it was that. And so the first thing I did, I remember phoning my mum to essentially question her and challenge her as to why I didn't have the mumps jab when I was a youngster. And she was like, well, you did. But that for me was me trying to apportion the blame onto her. and something which I have since apologised for, of course. But but it didn't stop there. You're looking for other reasons and other junctures in your life, other forks in the road where you want to lay the blame on. And the denial, of course I went through that, and depression and anger. I remember just being angry for months. I remember one day walking to work. I was working in Earls Court at the time, and used to I was working in West Brompton. I used to walk from Earls Court. It's about 10 minutes. Had my headphones in. Someone tapped me on the shoulder, a colleague, and he was like, I was like, morning, you know, take the headphones. He's like, what are you listening to? I said, Rage Against the Machine. He was like, it's 10 to 8.
Yeah.
But that's where I was. I was just angry all the time. But what's strange is that at the time I was apportioning that to other things like work. I was like, I hate my job and all this. And even though the answer was clear, but because when you're going through grief, you don't know, you're getting pulled along through it. And, you know, the final stage of grief, which I hadn't mentioned, being acceptance, and that takes a hell of a long way. And there's a lot of soul searching. And essentially, as a man, I had my identity stripped away. You kind of build up this thing of like, that's what men are for. We procreate, we give the sperm, that's what we do. And suddenly you have that kind of core taken away that you can't do. And obviously there's a lot of ego in there as well. And yeah, I'm like, well, I'm like I said earlier, I'm 6'2", I'm not in bad shape. I can sink a good few pints on a Friday night and always be the last in the pub.
Yeah.
Like, I've never
like I'm a man sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what I felt. I was like, I'm a man. Like, what the fuck? This shouldn't happen to me. And you know, you say, oh, draw an infertile man. I'm thinking of like Mr. Burns on The Simpsons or something, and just like, you know, really, you know, just fragile and old, and like, not me. Yeah. I'm 34 and I go to the gym like that. So you have this huge rock to the core of your identity, and that takes a lot of rebuilding. It really does. And to the point where I told my wife, I said, you know, if you want to leave me and go and find a man who can give you that baby, that sperm, I can't do it. So I will not hold you back.
I mean, Shaun, you've touched on something amazing there, mate, and I really appreciate you opening up, because it's not an easy journey you've been on, and the fact that you're being brave and you're helping others, you know, even by telling your story, it is phenomenal, you know. And you've actually mentioned there something which touched me quite a bit, the fact that you were willing to sort of give up your happiness with your wife so that she could have, you know, potentially dreams that she's had and things that you had aligned before marriage with children and things like that. Now, this leads me on to something I want to ask you, and like I say, you can tell me as much or as little as you want. You know, we've got, you know, Dean, James, Joby, Rico, who's not here. You know, they've all got partners and they've all had difficulties at one time or another, apart from James, who's like 14, so he's not really lived his life. But, you know, all their partners have been there throughout and really supported them. And especially Joby, you know, his girlfriend is being phenomenal for him. And I just want to know about the dynamic with your wife, and did that change at all despite the problems that you were going through, and how did that progress to where you are, or where the obstacles that you've overcome, if you don't mind going into a bit of detail about that, just for anyone out there that may be struggling to have that conversation with their partner, and maybe they're going to learn from you, similar to they've learned the lads, that's all.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So essentially, I went like really within myself. I wasn't talking even to her. I looked around to see if I could find any support groups, any other men talking about it, and there were none. So I assumed it was only me that this was happening to. And I just completely shut down. And essentially, she shouldered that for me because I wasn't coping with it. People, and like I touched upon earlier, you get that constant question of when are you going to start having children? When are you going to start a family? When am I going to be a granddad again? Like I got from my dad a lot. And she essentially took on the mantle of infertility for the both of us. She didn't say it was her, but we started telling people that we are trying, but it's not as easy as you're led to believe. That was like the opening kind of gambit. And then eventually we might say stuff like, we're struggling. And when I say we, that was mostly her. I couldn't even say that. I remember a colleague actually saying, he was like, "Oh, when you two have been married for a few years, when are you going to start trying?" And I was like, "Oh, well, you know." And he said, "Oh, you're not a Jaffa, are you?" And that was literally in the midst of us trying. I'd had my diagnosis, and fucking, like, you know, no wonder men don't speak when you get shit like that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, and like, having since heard my story, he's apologized because he remembers it. That was like 2018. He remembers saying it, and he probably saw my reaction, to be fair. But you know, and like now I go, oh, I should have said something. Of course I wasn't going to. I was so far in my own hole, like that was never going to happen. But yeah, she essentially took it on as couple infertility rather than male, and I'm so grateful for that. And she did that with her friends as well, because they would say, "Oh, you know, what's going on?" She'll say, "Oh, we're struggling," and this is all which I found out afterwards. By the way, obviously she never told me at the time, because that would have deepened my pain really, and my guilt towards her. And yeah, she was amazing. She tried to put, she doesn't mind me saying, but she suffered with depression before this happened, and still while it was happening actually as well. And she was a lot further ahead of me with kind of self-care, personal development, how to really kind of help yourself when you're at those lows. And she could see I was there, and she was trying to espouse all that knowledge that she had. But the harder she pushed, the further I moved back, and she recognised that and laid off, and then learned that it was more like gentle, smaller steps. And so the most important thing she did, and this is like you said, for anyone else that's in the same situation listening, most important thing was that she read the signs that I was not ready, but didn't try and push. But crucially, she let me know in no uncertain terms that my position as her husband was not a threat. And that was actually key for me, because that really helped me. She
took the pressure off yourself a little bit.
Yeah. She let me know that. She said, "Look, when we got together, you didn't know this. I didn't know this. I didn't get with you because of your sperm. I got with you because of you." And that actually was one of the things that helped me start to rebuild that identity of really learning who I am. But kind of asking her, and I'll say that as a bit of a kind of a shortcut to lads that I speak to, is you need, if you need to know who you are, ask your partner, because they got with you because of that, because of those reasons. Like, you know, for example, your humor, your empathy, kindness, all those things that make you who you are. That is why they got with you, and that is who you are still. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I appreciate that, Shaun. Thank you very much, mate. I know it's a tough one to ask, but I think sharing those, it's really important for people who don't want to open up or aren't ready to open up. And, you know, luckily, like I say, we've had a few guys in there who've had partners behind them, pushing them. So no, I appreciate that. Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you.
I'll just jump in there, lads. Yeah, Shaun, really appreciate you sharing. A lot of this has sort of resonated with me. We've been trying for a baby for, she says for like two years. I think it's a little bit less than that. It's not. I don't think it's been as consistent as every month trying. Sometimes we'll have arguments, and then I would get punished by not being allowed to try. Yeah, but you know, we've been seriously trying now for probably like the last 8-9 months. She's now doing ovulation tests. I went for my sperm check, and obviously you were talking about the 35 million thing. Does it, because I never actually received a letter or anything with my results, and then I rang the doctors and I just spoke to the receptionist, and she just said on the phone, she just said, "Oh yeah, it just says everything's normal," but like they didn't give me a reading as to how normal it was. Is that how they say it? Is it just normal, or is it good, or is it very good, or is it normal or not? Like, I wasn't too sure. But one of the things we're struggling with is my wife's actually Japanese. So part of that, we need to get like a spouse visa. And with your spouse visa, you need to pay a health surcharge to the government. So you pay £500 a year. And that allows you to get any NHS treatment you need. So you can get brain tumor, heart transplant, whatever you need, apart from fertility help. Fertility help is the only thing in the whole of the NHS that we're not allowed to get help with. So I went for help with mine. She went originally first. she got referred, and then we got a letter to say, actually, you're not allowed to. You have to be a citizen first. So she's 30 now. It's another 2.5 years. So it's just 32 and a half. So then that's, what they say, 35, you're running a risk. So try and get it done sooner than that. And then I did my test, and they said to me, oh, well, we would tell you to recommend your partner to go and get tested. And I explained, and they just said, oh, yeah, well, there's nothing you can do. So it's just a bit of a struggle for us, because we're in limbo of, is there a problem, or is it just a case of it just hasn't happened, or what, So it's hard, stressful, especially we go to my mum and dad's, and they're always saying, are you still trying? We're like, we're really trying, but I'm bored. That's how much we're trying. I'm sick. I've got to go upstairs after this, and I can't be bothered.
He tells us this every week. Even when we're
week.
not talking about fertility, he tells us it. I think it's rubbed it in.
It's one of them. But even my dad's, he said it's the lads' banter, isn't it? Oh, you're not firing blanks, are you? He's got about 18 kids, so he's always joking on saying that he's
got a full football squad, not a five.
Yeah. None of them good enough to play for us, but yeah, it's a struggle, and I think that it doesn't make any sense, the fertility part being the only thing that you can't get help with. I mean, we're not necessarily asking for IVF, but just the test to see if there's any problem with her, but they just won't do it. So I don't know if there's any general advice that you've got. I know you were touching on before, things that people can do to improve their sperm. The fact that I've just got a normal sample, is there things I can do to boost it? Obviously, I would imagine cutting alcohol out, but just any thoughts or opinions on that, mate?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry to hear you're having that trouble. The fertility funding in this country is a joke, quite frankly. It's a postcode lottery. When we were going through it, we lived in Hertfordshire, and they didn't do fertility. They didn't have the facility to do it anywhere there. But once we jumped through all the hoops, and that was a whole year in 2018 before we got funding, we were essentially given a funding package for 2 cycles, and we could go and pick any clinic we wanted. So we chose one in Cambridgeshire. We looked at some in London, but I didn't really want to, what's like with public transport. And if you're going to like a really important appointment, I didn't want to have to rely on that. We went up to Cambridge to this clinic. I went for an operation to have my balls cut open, essentially, and which I haven't even come onto yet. But the couple that were next to us, they lived 5 minutes from the clinic, and they didn't get funding, and we were traveling an hour with our funding to go there. It's really a joke, and like, I'm sorry to hear that, because it just adds another stress. But in terms of your test results, you are entitled to anything that's about you from the doctors. So I've every time I ever have a blood test, because I have mine monitored quite regularly now because of the TRT, I always get the results. And actually, it's like when I moved down a year ago, I got my first ones done down here, and they're refusing to give them to me. And I was like, I've got my blood tests going back 3 years. I want them, please. I monitor it myself, because I always say our health is our responsibility. And so firstly, I'll get those so you can have a good idea of when they say normal, because what they'll be looking at is reference ranges. So, for example, to give an example that I know that I can talk about is testosterone. They class the normal reference ranges between 7.9 and 31. My highest I've ever known when I first started getting tested was 12. I was 34 at the time. This is when we were first starting and getting tested. And the lifestyle I was leading, that I should have been up in the high teens, early 20s, easy. But I was still like boozing quite a lot at the time. But when they say normal, like you can be 7.9 in class as normal. 7.9 for testosterone is what a flipping 80-year-old man should have. Like, so that's bullshit. Like, you need to get those results so you know where you are, because that kind of, to be cast off and just say, oh, you're in your normal range. Like, you need to be kind of just have a better idea. But in terms
would it normally have more information on there? Would it?
Like, it would it'll tell you exactly what your figures are, what they're and then so next to it, so it will have your results, and then it will have the World Health Organization reference ranges for what is normal. So get those, check them out, and then you can, because I always say with Google you have to treat it with caution. But then at least once you know what yours are, you can start looking. And there's some really informative things out there. Like there's an Instagram account called Test Him. There's some really good guys in the industry who they actually, one of them's a scientist, I believe. But so that, you know, there's people that can help once you know those. I've lost my train of thought now. What? So, in terms of getting increasing your chances essentially. So modern lifestyles are complete dog shit essentially for fertility, health, both men and women. So obviously booze, like we've talked about. Then there's like high sugar diets. And don't get me wrong, I'm got the biggest sweet tooth going. But again, when you have a really strong why, I kicked booze and I kicked chocolate, which is like the two biggest joys in my life. But it's like you do it. And so booze, high sugar, and essentially you want to be trying to keep your hormones on a decent level. So I followed what is a low glycemic diet. So that's actually what diabetic people follow, because essentially things that spike your blood sugar levels and then crash off the other side, where when you get those crashes off after having like sugar and stuff, what that's doing is taking your hormones with it as well. So when you're actually wanting to regulate and try and be as healthy as you can, having slow digesting stuff, like, so for example, like white potatoes, they can spike your blood sugar just as much as sweets can. And even how you cook stuff. So everyone thinks, okay, I'll have a sweet potato instead. But if you're baking it, all that's doing is massively increasing the sugar levels of that anyway. Things like hot tubs. So the reason your balls hang a couple of inches lower than the rest of your body is to keep the balls cooler. They need to be around 2 degrees cooler than body temperature. But excessive use of saunas and hot tubs is not good for sperm health. Cycling, it has been kind of mooted as potentially being a bit not ideal because of the pressure on the scrotum. What else would there be? Tight fitting pants. I've always been a box shorts person myself anyway, but they say that really tighty whities are not a good idea in that respect, because again it's pulling your sack up higher towards your body and keeping them warmer. Laptops on your lap. Phones in your pocket next to your balls, all the stuff that's heating it up. And then generally things that aren't always in our control, but microplastics in our diet and stuff. But just being more aware of where you're getting your water from and stuff like that. And you can go really down wormholes with it, but just it's hard to live this lifestyle, because say you're hungry, you go in a shop, easiest things to get are all the like crisps, chocolate, for example, even the separate like processed sandwiches, like the packaged sandwiches. It's all not great. Like anything that's been too far removed from its natural state should be, if you can, avoided as much as you can. I always make my own food now, which has come as a result of my like what I went through, because I became so strict with my diet. And ultimately, I had no sperm from the outset. There was a small chance that anything would help, but you do anything you can to help. And then on the mental and emotional side, so say about your family, like I've been there. Pretty much everyone who's ever struggled has been there. And in the end, my wife and I looked my dad and my stepmom in the eyes and said, do not ask us anything ever again about us trying for babies until we choose to tell you, because we had told them. They knew we were struggling, they didn't know why, but we were still getting comments like, some of dad's like covered in tats, he's got all these like any children, he's got like names, dates of birth and all this, and he's like running out of space. And it was just like, when am I gonna be a granddad again? We just couldn't take it. We were at such a low ebb at that time. And so if you need to, you safeguard yourself that way, and you tell people, look, we will share when we're ready, but stop asking, because it's not appropriate. You don't have to say you're struggling. Just say, you were talking about the most intimate thing possible. Can you please stop asking about it? Or however that dynamic is with your father. If you need to, you have to, because it grates and it can be all consuming. And that's the thing. And that's why I shook my head when you say about kind of not getting that funding, because and fertility treatment not being part of that what you're essentially paying for, because people still think a bit of it as like a lifestyle choice. Having fertility treatment is like the same as flipping having a boob job or a nose job or something. The World Health Organization class infertility as a disability, but yet it's not treated routinely on the NHS, and it's an absolute joke because it's completely like one of the most stressful things you can go through. A study showed that 90% of people who go through fertility struggles have suffered depression, and out of them 42% considered suicide. And you're telling me that shouldn't be something which we are entitled to on healthcare? It's an absolute joke.
Do you know when you reference that, post you getting the result that you have no sperm and it's a real challenge, is there any wraparound support from the NHS of how to actually cope with that, how to deal with it? No. That seems like a big gap, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I last year spoke in front of a room full of fertility nurses, specifically fertility nurses. I think there was about 200 or 300 there, and they all work in clinics around the UK and Ireland. And I specifically spoke about that, the lack of help and care for firstly couples, but especially men, because let me tell you something interesting. Even though it was established that the infertility was on my side, it was male infertility. We went to the fertility clinic when we were then accepted there. We had a patient number. We both had the same number, but mine was the same number with a P after, and that stood for patient. No, sorry, for partner. I got that, for partner. So I was still deemed to be the partner of the fertility patient, even though we were there because of me. And that's how, and then you can imagine how the rest of the care goes then with that, because they offer you as a matter of course, or they just go, oh, we have counsellors on site if you need them, just as like a tick in a box. Mm-hmm. But this is literally like, it's life changing. It's life changing. It's life limiting because of things you cannot do. We essentially put our life on hold for 4 years whilst we were trying. We had notions of wanting to move somewhere, but like, as I said, we did last year now, but you don't, because we're then tied in with that funding in that area. I had considered changing careers and stuff, and again, that's just put on hold because you're like, no, I've got a safe income. I don't know what's going to happen with this, whether we're going to need to start paying if those 2 rounds don't work, and it's completely, it takes over everything, and the support isn't there for that, and I'm now getting direct referrals from those fertility nurses from that room, who have acknowledged and who see in their own clinics that especially the men aren't catered for that help. And I've been messaged by dozens of them saying, like, anytime a man is struggling, we tell him you. And this is, they will have in-house counsellors, but by and large they'll be, and this is, I have not taken anything away from their profession, but they would usually be middle-aged plus women. And no matter what took them there, like, some of them are doing it because they may have gone through their own struggles, but they are still women. And when I was offered that, there was no chance in hell I was going to go and speak to a woman about me not having sperm as a man. I needed to speak to another man, preferably another man that had been through it. And firstly, there was no male patient care, and secondly, I couldn't find any other men talking about it.
So since you've moved into what you do today, have you? So it's one of those things, right? Where once you start talking about something all the time and you see it all the time, have you noticed that there is a lot more out there than you realised, or is it as little as I probably think it is, that what people still aren't talking about it at all?
Yes, it still is. I'd say worldwide, I can think of less than 10 people. Wow. When I started, there was still no one. And I'm not saying I was like the cascading, like, snowball effect. Around about 2 or 3 lads did start at the same time. We were literally all within weeks of each other, which is great. And then actually, literally a week after I pressed go on my Instagram account, that Rod Gilbert thing came out, and I think it's on the BBC. Yeah. He had like really low sperm count or something. So that's all what we need, that conversation going, especially from notable people like him. But what I found really interesting about his program is that he was on telly talking about having fertility struggles and the issue coming from his side. And then when he went to the marketing company and they devised this him fertility, they're saying, yeah, we think you could be the face of this. He was really reluctant. And it's like, wow, but you're on a telly program talking about it. But that shows,
which is probably bigger than the campaign probably ever would have been anyway.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because the horrible thing is, I don't think society really cares about it. Like, because if they did, there would be the support there and people would talk about it way more open than they do. It's one of those where, like, we've got loads of listeners, and without people commenting on the page, I can see my inbox is full of people saying, wow, this is amazing, I've had struggles myself. And I suppose my question around that would be, how do we actually change it? Is it having more of these conversations? Is it just opening up more about our experiences? Like where do you see, or how do you see we get to that position where at a societal level, this isn't something that is taboo and it's a common conversation that men open up about? Yeah,
it all is about conversation. And so as I said, the stats being 1 in 6 people. So then you say about 50% of that male. Like, so you're in any given office, any given pub, there is someone there who is going through it or has been or will. You know, just in this room now, like 5 of us on the screen and 3 of us have, like, 1 definitely been through it, 2 have expressed concern. Like, it's everywhere. And I jokingly said to my best mates, because there are 6 of us, and I said, oh, I've taken the bullet on this one, and someone else's turn for the next thing. But like,
have they all got tested since? Like, have they all got their sperm?
Well, part of the problem for me feeling so isolated was that these are literally like my day one mates. Like, you know, we've all been friends since 5 years old. They already had kids. One of them has got two boys, and he had both of them at the first time of asking. And when I couldn't find anyone else talking about it, and I'm seeing my mates just like literally getting it at the drop, like at the first time of asking type thing, it just then compounds the feeling that, oh, this is only me. So there was like a very gradual process to kind of like skip widely through the story, but I had 2 operations to try and rectify it. The second one being literally having my balls cut open, and there's still nothing. They couldn't find anything even at the source. And we then made the decision that we were going to progress and use donor sperm, which is, again, it's that last part of acceptance, of grief being acceptance, and me getting there and realizing that I had so much more to give as a father. But when I told my friends, and we told them before we started doing that, because also we always knew that we would tell any future children that, like, of their how they came to be conceived and stuff. Their response was, it just blew me away. It firstly validated why they are my good friends and why I've had them in my life for 35 years. But it just shows that men, we get a bad rap for not talking and stuff, but people are good. Do you know what I mean? Like, none of them try to come up with quips or almost toxic positivity to try and make me feel better. They just listened. And one of them especially blew me away. He cried, and he just said, "I'm really proud of you for what you've been through, mate." And that, it just meant the world. He didn't have to say anything. He just listened. He held that space, and he told me he was proud of me as a friend. And, like, you know, when you've got these issues, and they are all around, but when you can speak to your mates who you know haven't faced that, and when they can be that empathetic, that was then the real kind of kicker for me to do what I'm doing now and start talking about it, because that's what the world needs. And it's talking about everything. Like I said at the outset, there's this big umbrella of men's health, and and females as well, but they're obviously a lot better at talking than we are. But there's so many things underneath that, and if we're just talking about it all, how do you think about how much of a better place men would be in? Because it's like I say to guys all the time, we all have mental health, and they go, no, I don't have mental health issues. I said, no, not right now. You might, but so a lot of people confuse mental health with mental illness. We all have mental health, just like we have physical health. And you know that if you're overtraining, you think, right, I need to calm down a bit here because I might ding a muscle or something. But we don't do that mentally. We just keep going all the time. all the time until it's too late. We're not recognizing those signs. We're not taking those rest days. We're not just acknowledging that we all have it. We all have those. And like I said, I loved it when you started the chat with checking in. How are we? Because we just don't do stuff like that. But we don't do that ourselves. And that is crucial. It's really crucial to ask those questions of, how am I showing up today? How am I? Who's relying on me? How am I showing up for them? But ultimately, you have to fill your own cup first. And because if it's a bit of I don't know if you've had this analogy before, but I love it. It's when you're on an aeroplane, and if they drop the gas things, you have to put your own on first. Because if you can't breathe, you're no help to anyone else. You're no good. Mm-hmm. So you have to look after yourself first, and then fill your own cup and make sure. And if you're having a bad day, for whatever reason it is, then you do what you bring in those coping strategies that you use, and do what you need to do. And that'll be different for everyone, but recognizing what it is that can kind of get you out of that, or at least start taking small steps to do that.
Yeah, Shaun, you mentioned there, mate, quite a few things that I want to pick out and sort of probe. I know you've touched on a few of it. First of all, I just want to say that it's great that your friends have actually stood by you, and they've give you that space to talk and not try and compromise the conversation by making a joke, which I'm more than guilty of. I'm very much, I'll hold my hands up and say if it's uncomfortable or awkward or anything like that, I'll try and make a joke to make the person feel better. And sometimes that's not what you need. Sometimes you do need that, you're going to be all right, or that space to talk. So it's something I need to work on personally. Just something I want to ask as well, because, we've all been guilty, as you've mentioned, and you've touched on it briefly. We've all been guilty of keeping secrets from friends and maybe not opening up as much. It's the, yeah, I'm good, how are you sort of thing when people ask. How or what would you advise people in a situation, whether it's a similar situation to yourself, or a situation with depression or mental health, or, anything? How would you advise people to maybe get over the barrier of talking to their friends and opening up, and giving them the credit that maybe I've not give my friends, you've not give your friends? Try and give them that bit of credit and give them that bit of rope where you can let them in and try and sort of lean on them. Because I think that's what this podcast, was started for. We've all had a tough time. So I just wanted to know how you would go about that, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't think the whole thing of asking twice really works. I mean, this is for me, but they say, "Oh, how are you?" No, how are you really? I know that if I was asked that question when I was at my lowest of lows, I still wouldn't have opened up. I just would have continued to reiterate, "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks." So I think it's firstly knowing that you are a trusted and valued friend, and that's the real foundation of it, is knowing that person, that they can tell you whatever, and knowing that it's not going to go any further, because trust is key. And if you haven't got that, what have you got really? So that's kind of almost like the unspoken thing, is just being loyal and knowing that you have high integrity, and you won't leverage that against them at any point. But it's almost like fostering a culture of sharing, and it doesn't mean that you're going to go around almost mining for someone to open up and just trying to say, "Oh, I've got this, what have you got?" Like trading cards. It's not that. Just if you're having, it's opening those lines of communication and saying, if one day, for example, just phoning one of them or whatever it is, or saying, "Can we go for a beer?" And then just saying, "Oh, I've got this," or "Can I run this by you?" or "I'm having a bit of a tough time." And you don't have to. It's not about manufacturing that, but it's as and when that comes up. Then what that does is then creates a culture where you're more open with your friends, and especially like in this kind of laddie culture. And it's something that Lewis mentioned earlier. But how do we change the culture? Talking about this is acknowledging that we're not in this kind of post-industrial era that our grandfathers and fathers were, where it was like deemed to be, the man provides, you put food on the table, and we go out and work. No, that's nonsense. We're in a whole different era now. We're all connected. It's easy to do this. We're all in, I've heard you talk about Mackems and stuff, so presumably we're the complete opposite ends of the country, some of us, and it's easy to do, and it's a wonderful thing, and we need to harness that and create these safe spaces. And what you're doing, boys, is amazing, because it will show that men can talk, and that is really the foundation of it all is sharing and opening up communication.
Yeah, I think having guests like yourself, having some of our previous guests and the ones that are coming on, it makes me feel so humbled, genuinely, that we're able, like, we are just a normal group of mates who, some have known each other. I've known Ethan 12 years. I've known James 9. Obviously, how long he's been with my sister. I've known Dean, 2 now, something like that. And the amazing thing is, what this podcast has really shown me is, irrespective of your status, as you mentioned before, ethnicity, like your socioeconomic background, any of those sorts of things, we all struggle with men struggle with their health. We've all struggled to speak up. It doesn't come natural to us. And so when you were talking around that probably post-industrial time when men couldn't talk up because we had to be a man and we had to be really tough, and that's how we survived. I hope if we do anything is that we inspire some people, and we have today, but I hope if we can do anything for the rest of the time we do this podcast is keep making sure men realize that it is absolutely okay to talk. I don't believe it's okay not to be okay and just sit there in silence. Like, it's okay to not be okay, but do something about it. Speak to someone, get help, be proactive. Like, do not sit there in silence. So yesterday was obviously World Suicide Prevention Day. We all play football. I started a football team a few years ago. Basically, it was like the preface of what this podcast is. Essentially, getting me and my group of mates to get out there and play football and be active, socialize, all that sort of stuff. And yesterday we took our picture with our shirts back to front or inside out, because that was the campaign. And I look at some of the lads in our football team who are definitely struggling, but aren't at that stage yet in their life of maybe owning their shit or owning the fact that they aren't in the place they want to be mentally yet. And I'm hoping even us as a group of mates can try and inspire our other groups of mates and other people's groups of mates, that then in turn to actually realize that you can do something about your health. And we look at health now. We were educated very early on from Tim Harkness, who was head of sports science and psychology at Chelsea Football Club. He referenced the fact that it's not mental, physical health; it's just health. And the sooner we get it on that page of it's just health, and everything encompasses health. Just like we would go to the doctors for a broken leg, well, we need to go and speak to someone properly around our minds not being in the right place, or our well-being not being where it should be. So probably to round off my point, I'm so grateful to have genuinely you come to our friend circle here and share your story. And I found it hugely inspiring. It's not been something that I've personally struggled with, but now hearing that my brother-in-law is, and tonight's the first night I've heard that, it makes me really sad that he's maybe felt like that and I haven't been able to identify that or know that, because everything you've said around people saying, oh, you're having a baby soon, you're having a baby soon. So I had a son about 14 months ago. My brother, who's obviously James's other brother-in-law, he's had a son fairly recent in comparison to that time. And the next conversation in our family is, well, when's James and India having a baby? They've got to be soon. They're married. And I've felt myself join into that sort of idea of, well, they must be, they're married, they live together, they've been together 9 years. Surely the next thing's a baby. So firstly, I'll apologize, James. And I know you won't want me to apologize, but I will, because tonight has made me truly realize the impact of even just those comments where you feel you're being supportive. I probably haven't been, because actually I should have said that next question down of, is everything all right? Are you okay? Because you've always just palmed it off like, no, we're not ready yet. We're not at that stage. Like, we're only young. We're going to go and move abroad and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, tonight has massively opened my eyes.
Yeah, I honestly, like, I know all you guys have been battling your own demons and stuff, and that's why we started the podcast. I've always said that I've come on here as like a preventative measure. I've never suffered with any sort of bad mental health or anything, but I know it's a massive important topic that we need to talk about. But like today, like this must be how you guys feel like every time when you just come on, because like, I do feel like a massive relief. Like, it does feel really good to just like talk about it, and yeah, like I feel like every man feels like they'll be able to have a kid until it comes to it. You know, you're never thinking, I probably can't have them. You always think, oh, I can, until someone tells you that you can't, you know? So it's like, it's been like a real relief for me. Big weight off the shoulders as well. So really,
Well, I'm proud of you
Shaun,
for speaking up, mate. Really proud.
Aye, good job, mate. Well done.
Yeah, well in, James. Well in, mate.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, so I suppose just this last sort of section, Shaun, before we wrap up, where are you today? Like, where are you mentally after, obviously, what's happened? I know some of your story, I'll not tell it. But where are you today? What does life look like for you today following everything that you went through?
Yeah, good. I'm Shaun 2.0, essentially. I'm stronger mentally, a lot stronger. Having been through that, I had to like peel off the layers of my onion, so to speak, take off the armor, and really get to nitty gritty of who I am and what makes me strong, and then you then apply back those layers back on, and that does then become like a coat of armor. But it's important, like to run with that analogy, to say that doesn't mean you don't let people in, because you still need to. And my wife always says, like, we now talk so much. Like, I'm so open now, whereas before, even not just about that, just I was just so base. I was such a bloke, like just normal conversations. Like, but now we can like have full like emotional conversations about life, us, our kids, and like our other stuff, just like you know, in general, and that's a wonderful place to be, to that kind of authentic, or being authentically me, and really knowing who I am, and like you were saying, when recognizing those signs of if I am taking a dip and that I need to have a bit of time on my own, but and also knowing how I maintain my health, and I love that. Yeah, like it's so true. It is just health. I know if I can just get an hour to myself every day, which it's almost a non-negotiable. Like, so today, went surfing at 7 a.m. If I get that in, I'm like, my needle is high. I've pushed it. You know, things test us in life. They chip away. But if I can just get that time exercising, and it doesn't mean going flat out, doesn't mean surfing or whatever, you know, just walking outside in nature, listening to podcasts, or nothing, listening to the birds in the trees, and just that time of thinking, of letting thoughts go as well, and just realizing, like, you know, there's just for like gratitude is something that's massive for me. But often, like, if I get a feeling that things are getting a bit on top, I just get out, just remind myself of everything I've got to be grateful for. And I would never have done that before. I would never have written down how I'm feeling. I would just stay in here, and that is literally the worst place you can be. I would bury myself in there, and actually realizing this could go out on podcasts, I'm pointing to my head, but so I would stay in my head, and not so good for the audio there, pointing to my head, but yeah,
we've all done it,
you know. Yeah, but like, just I started journaling when I was going through it, and I'm not doing it every day now, but it got me through. I downloaded this app called Day One, and it's like a journaling app. It shows your consecutive days. My record was up in the 280 something without missing a day. And when you're getting the thoughts out of here, again, I'm doing it out of your head, onto paper, onto your phone, just about how you're feeling. Like I said earlier, like, who are you showing up for today? How am I being the best version of myself? If I'm not, what can I do to address that? And that was huge for me, really. And yeah, so that's where I am today, to give you a very concise answer to a long-winded overall. But yeah, like I said, Shaun 2.0, and it's a better place to be as me, as a man.
All right, sounds like you made some real progress there, and listening to some of the things that you've said that work for you, like journaling. Dean, you mentioned that on the last episode, didn't you? You were talking about how you did a U and bought the most expensive journal in the world ever.
Yeah.
And did journaling for a bit. And
well, I wrote about 3 pages.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But I think that there's so much that because I love to go and listen back to the episodes after, like, tomorrow, the day after, or whatever. Because there's been so much tonight where it just resonated around my own thoughts and feelings, like how I cope with things, maybe how I am as a friend. Hearing how your friends reacted, I'd like to think I would be in their bucket of people versus what Ethan described himself as. I think Ethan probably gave himself a discredit slightly, though, because what I've been going through, probably last year, but mainly the last couple of months, he's probably been there for me more than anyone. So I'm super grateful of that.
You're welcome,
love you,
pal.
brother.
Don't worry. Love you, pal.
I suppose, Ethan, we'll go to your section, and then we will wrap it up. If that's all right.
Can I just jump in quickly? Just say, Lewis, don't be too hard on yourself, because ultimately you don't know what you don't know, and those comments, that kind of, everyone does it in society, but essentially, then what you've done today in having this and throughout all of your podcasts, and not just for yourselves and those here, but those listening, you are then, it's about education, and it'll just give people that second to pause and go, oh, I might not ask that because, and this is this one topic today, but you think about all the people you've spoken to and all the people then that listen to that, and then who may then say that to someone else. So that education is huge. And so thank you for doing it. But yeah, just don't, and that's the same for anyone. Don't be too hard on yourselves. And often it's not a case of what to say, it's what not to say. And if someone does share with you, don't think, oh, I need to answer this, or like you said, crack a joke. Just listen. Like, don't underestimate how important that is.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Thank you.
Definitely. I agree with you, Shaun. Definitely, mate. On that side, but I'll be hard on Lewis. He doesn't need to be hard on himself. I'll be hard enough. So Shaun, just a quick one, mate. Just a bit of light-hearted fun. We have something called See No Evil, Hear No Evil, or Hear No Evil, See No Evil. Depends what week it is.
He actually doesn't know what one it is.
We don't know what it is.
I don't know either.
We don't know. But basically, we ask a guest, obviously to be really insightful, but we ask a guest for a podcast, a book, or we've even went to TV show / film, but really a podcast or a book which has got you through probably one of your darkest periods. I know I was reading an article today that you recommend something called The Little Big Things. I don't know if that would be your recommendation, but if not, if you can give us something that the listeners would like to, that's it. If you wouldn't mind explaining, go on then. Tell us about that. Seems you've got it.
That book changed my life. Not even playing it down. It's it's by Henry Fraser. It's just like almost the running theme. He was just a normal lad, like rugby player. His brother was actually a pro for the Sarries for a while. He was in Portugal with his mates. I think post A-levels, perhaps maybe post GCSEs, but they were just playing rugby on the beach in Portugal. And they said, right, let's all go for a swim. They all ran and dived in, and he cracked his head on a sandbar and became paralysed from the neck down. And yeah, literally in that instant, his whole life changed. And he literally still now cannot move anything below his neck. And if you go on his Instagram, so Henry Fraser or his website, it is inspirational. So his book, like, it talks about gratitude. And so the kind of tagline is an unforgettable story of acceptance and making every day a good day. So he talks literally when he's lying there in hospital in Portugal and like just not knowing what's going to happen and being, needing breathing apparatus to breathe, being fed through tubes. And then he goes on to explain about the first time, for example, they took him out of the bed and wheeled him outside, and he felt the sun on his face. Like that extreme gratitude for that, something which we just take for granted all the time. the first time he tasted water in his mouth again, just the intense sensation that gave him, because again, we just do it because we can turn the tap on with that, in a Western world, for example, we're so easily kind of nourished and
fulfilled.
Just yeah, exactly. And it talks about like the cards that he got from his friends and just everything. And that I read that 3 weeks after I'd had my ball operation, and that was like the final thing for me. It was like there is nothing. Like we've even opened your balls up and there's nothing there. This book was the final thing that got me to acceptance. Hearing someone else, completely different story, but how he had his life changed and how he came to accept it for what it is. And he's now he's a speaker now. But for me, the most inspirational thing was he started painting with his mouth with a stylus on an iPad at first, because it was literally like he could only move his head, and started out just writing like quotes and stuff. And now you should see some of the drawings he does. They are like absolute works of art. But 2 of his quotes actually I bought and framed, and they became our mantra actually throughout our struggle, like the kind of latter part. One being every day is a good day, and the other one is accept and adapt, because ultimately his story is different to mine, but the same applied, and it will apply across any struggle that anyone has.
That's a great cause, mate.
I'm definitely going to buy that book.
Well, Dino actually buys every book that a guest recommends.
Doesn't read them.
Shaun,
doesn't read them.
He doesn't read them. He just buys them and he props his pool table up with them in the background.
Yeah,
that's all he does.
Also very guilty of that. Any podcast I ever listen to where his book comes up, I buy it. I've heard the term. So obviously they're kind of, people call them like personal development books or self-help books. They say they're shelf-help books because it's making my shelf look very good. But,
I was going to say I'll buy it, but she's sitting right here, so I'm not saying anything.
That's a good phrase. That a new good phrase.
Yeah.
Self-help.
I've actually I've vowed not to buy a single book until I've finished all the ones I've got, because I've got a huge backlog.
No, I need to do that.
I knew exactly where to go for this one, because I'm due another read of it. Actually, you'll read it in about 3 days. Firstly, it's not that big, but secondly, it's just unput downable. And that, I'd say, not only did that book change my life, but that is the reason for what I'm doing now and sharing my story. Because having read that, we were on holiday in the south of France, and I then went back to our campsite. We'd driven down in our camper van, which is like our initial pride and joy. And but I started writing my story on my notes in my phone, and that essentially became my account sharing my story.
Brilliant. No, that's great, mate. I really appreciate it. So the Little Big Things by Henry Fraser. That's the recommendation. So I appreciate that. Thank you, mate, for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was incredible. And so, Shaun, just to probably follow up on what I said before, I'm personally super grateful, and I know we were speaking for probably a few weeks to get you on, and it's just been a hugely eye-opening podcast for me, and I've learned so much, and it's probably going to strengthen my relationship with James even further as my little brother, another little brother that I've got. So I'm truly grateful for this one, and I'm sure I'll never forget it. One thing, so we'll have listeners, 1 in 6 men obviously affected. How can they find you? How can they reach out to you? Yeah, we'll do the plugs.
Yeah, great. So Instagram is at knackered_knackers.
I love that.
Do you know, I toiled for so long, because that was what I started on. Was the Insta? But I was like, oh, people are going to think that I'm a twat. I'm like making fun of it, but ultimately,
you have to a bit.
Yeah. It's my personality, you know. And if I try to think of something like really heartfelt and meaningful, and I was like, nah, fuck it, just go all in. Knackered Knackers. But yeah, that's like the best place. Or if you're not on Instagram, www.knackeredknackers.com.
Love it.
Brilliant. And just a little one from me before we go. If anyone's got an old Nokia 310 kicking around, any of our fans that has Shaun's photo on there, please reach out to us on Instagram or via the Facebook page. You know what to do. Get involved.
Yeah. Share
they say
the
once it's
knackers.
out there. Yeah, exactly. They say once it's out there, it's you can never recall it. So it's there somewhere.
Yeah, someone will
We'll
definitely find it. Dean, James, your closing thoughts, boys?
I'll just go jump in, James. No, I really appreciate it. I think for me, I'm definitely going to get in touch with the doctors and just see if I can get a little bit more information than it's normal, and then maybe see if we can go from there. And I think probably the advice that you give is about, just being honest with people and just saying, look, you don't need to ask every time now. We'll let you know when it happens. I think that's probably good advice. Probably something I'm not scared to say that sort of thing, but it just doesn't pop in your head that you can say that sort of thing, does it? So, but I appreciate that, mate. I appreciate you opening up as well. James, what about you?
Yeah, so, as I said earlier, massive relief, massive weight off my shoulders. I feel class having talked about it. And yeah, we'll see what the future brings. Hopefully get some answers soon. But thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Let's stay in touch. And yeah, if you ever need to chat anymore, like any of you at all, then I'm here. And likewise, I know where to come for some really sage advice from some top chaps.
Yeah,
always, mate. Always.
We'll definitely keep in touch, and I'm sure there's lots of things we have planned around maybe getting some guests on with guests, and we have certain conversations and stuff. And yeah, I'm sure it'll not be the last time you're on the Everyman, mate.
Anytime. It's a real privilege. Thanks for having me.
No, appreciate it very much. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you are listening on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Acast, at a later date and it's not live, thank you very much for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next one.
See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Peace.
Let's go. Time to grind, get inside your mind. Yeah, we working overtime. That's the only way to climb. We gon' make it in our prime. Signing on the dotted line, cashing checks left and right. That's the way I'm living life.